Now I'd like to help kick off the premiere of an exciting new comedy show, which you're all going to enjoy for a long, long time, starring Tom and Dick Smothers.
Well, was that it?
Yep, I like to hit 'em hard and get out quick.
Tommy, that's a stupid song. I never heard of it. I don't know where you got it, but it's stupid.
In 1969, a funny TV show suddenly disappeared from American television. One day, millions of people were watching and laughing. The next day, it was gone forever. No one said goodbye. No one explained why. The show was called the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour, and it was banned because of one scene that was too scary for TV bosses to show. Back in the 1960s, television was very different from today. There were only 3 big TV networks that everyone watched. These were NBC, ABC, and CBS. Most TV shows were safe and boring. They never talked about serious things like war or politics. Shows like The Ed Sullivan Show and The Beverly Hillbillies were popular because they made people feel good without making them think too hard. But America was changing in the 1960s. Young people were starting to ask questions about the Vietnam War. They wanted to know why so many soldiers were dying in a faraway country. They were also fighting for equal rights for black people. Music was getting louder and more rebellious. Comedy was starting to change too. Instead of just silly jokes, comedians began making fun of important things like the government and society. CBS was one of the biggest TV networks, but it was having a problem. Older people still watched their shows, but younger viewers were getting bored. The network needed something new and fresh to compete with the other networks. That's when they decided to give Tom and Dick Smothers their own variety show. Tom and Dick Smothers were brothers who did comedy together. Tom was the younger brother who acted silly and confused. Dick was the older brother who was more serious and smart. They sang songs and told jokes that seemed harmless and fun. When CBS asked them to host a new show, the network thought they were getting something safe that families could watch together. The Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour started on February 5th, 1967. At first, it was exactly what CBS wanted. The brothers sang songs, told jokes, and had other performers come on the show. Everything seemed normal and safe. People liked watching it, and the ratings were good. But Tom Smothers wasn't happy with just being funny. He thought television should do more than just entertain people. He wanted to talk about real problems that were happening in America. He believed that comedy could help people understand serious issues while still making them laugh. So Tom slowly started changing the show. He didn't do it all at once because he knew that would cause trouble. Instead, he made small changes bit by bit. He began inviting guests who had strong opinions about important things. These weren't just any singers or comedians. They were people who spoke out against the Vietnam War and fought for civil rights. One of the first controversial guests was Pete Seeger, a folk singer who had been banned from TV for years because of his political views. Pete came on the show and sang songs that were against the war. The song Waist Deep in the Big Muddy was a clear attack on the Vietnam War and President Johnson's decisions. Joan Baez, another famous singer, performed a song dedicated to her husband, who was in prison for refusing to fight in the war. The rock band Jefferson Airplane came on and sang songs about drugs and rebellion. The Who, a British rock band, played so loudly and wildly that they broke their instruments on stage. These weren't just music performances. They were sending messages to the audience, especially to young people who were questioning the war and the government. The show was still funny and entertaining, but now it had a deeper meaning. Tom also hired new writers who understood what young people were thinking. One of these writers was Steve Martin, who later became a famous comedian. These writers created sketches that didn't just make people laugh, they made people think about politics, society, and what was wrong with America. The show started attracting more and more young viewers, especially college students. For the first time, they felt like a TV show was speaking directly to them. It wasn't just entertainment anymore. It was like having a conversation with someone who understood their feelings about the war, civil rights, and the changes happening in America. But not everyone was happy with these changes. Older viewers, especially in the South, started complaining. They wrote angry letters to CBS and called the TV stations. Some local stations even threatened to stop showing the program. The network began feeling pressure from advertisers who didn't want their products associated with controversial content. Tom Smothers didn't care about the complaints. He believed the show had a responsibility to talk about important issues. He thought comedy had a special power to make people think in ways that serious news programs couldn't. But this meant the show had to be very careful about what it said and how it said it. CBS started watching the show more closely. Every script had to be approved by the network's censors before it could be shown on TV. The brothers had to submit each episode 10 days before it was supposed to air. This gave CBS time to cut out anything they didn't like. Tom didn't like this new rule. He often delivered the tapes at the last minute, hoping CBS wouldn't have time to make changes. This created more tension between the brothers and the network. What had once been a friendly relationship became a constant fight. The show kept pushing boundaries. Pat Paulson, a comedian on the show, started doing fake presidential campaign speeches. He would make ridiculous promises and say silly things about politics. While it was funny, it was also making fun of real politicians and showing how empty their promises often were. David Steinberg was another performer who caused controversy. He would dress up like a preacher and give fake sermons that mixed religion with politics. He would take Bible stories and use them to criticize the government and the war. Many religious viewers were offended by this, and hundreds of people called CBS to complain. In October 1968, some CBS stations refused to show an episode with one of Steinberg's sermons. The network received over 300 angry phone calls and letters, but young viewers loved these performances. They thought Steinberg was brave and intelligent. Bootleg recordings of the censored sketches started being passed around college campuses like underground art. As the show became more daring, CBS executives became more worried. They made the rules even stricter. Now every guest, every joke, and every sketch had to be approved in advance. The creative process became stressful and difficult. Writers and performers had to work knowing that their best material might be cut. But the team kept going. They believed their message was important. America was going through a difficult time with the Vietnam War, protests, and political assassinations. They felt television should reflect what was really happening in the world, not just show happy fake stories. The success of the show with young people only made the conflict worse. While college students remained loyal fans, the network became more uncomfortable with complaints from other viewers. CBS found itself in an impossible situation. The show was too popular to cancel, but too controversial to control. By early 1969, the tension had reached a breaking point. Every episode was a battle between the creators and the network. Scripts were reviewed and re-reviewed, edits were demanded, arguments became more intense. The atmosphere behind the scenes was becoming impossible to work in. The final crisis came in April 1969. Tom submitted an episode that featured David Steinberg performing another sermon sketch. This time, the content was more political and direct than anything they had done before. The set looked like a real church, with a pulpit and dramatic lighting. Steinberg came on stage dressed as a rabbi and began telling the Bible story of Moses. But this wasn't the regular Bible story. In his version, Moses became a symbol for people who opposed unjust wars. At the climax of the sketch, Moses spoke to Pharaoh, who clearly represented the American president. Jacob Diamond. Moses said, "Sorry, Mr. President, but take your army and go. I will not help you anymore." The studio audience burst into applause. For the people watching, it was a powerful moment that expressed their feelings about the Vietnam War. For CBS executives, it was the last straw. They had finally had enough. The sketch ended with a folk group singing a song called "No More Promised Lands." The lyrics told young people to stop believing empty government promises and to make their own choices about peace and war. At the very end, Steinberg threw his prayer shawl into the audience and shouted, "Peace, not war." When CBS received this episode, they immediately decided it would never be shown on television. The network claimed the episode was delivered late and violated their agreement. Tom argued that the tape was delivered on time and that CBS was just using the deadline as an excuse to censor the show. CBS executives demanded that the entire Steinberg sketch be removed. They told Tom that if he cut out that segment, the rest of the episode could still be shown. But Tom refused. For him, removing the sketch would destroy everything the show stood for. He would not compromise. On April 4th, 1969, CBS officially canceled the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour. There was no announcement. There was no chance for the brothers to say goodbye to their fans. The following week, a safe, non-political country comedy show called Hee Haw took their time slot. The banned episode never aired in America, but it was shown in Canada, where CBS had no control. Bootleg copies quickly spread among students and activists in the United States. The forbidden episode became legendary. People gathered in dorm rooms and coffee shops to watch it on worn videotapes. Young audiences saw the cancellation as a betrayal. They believed CBS cared more about avoiding controversy than about free speech. Small protests took place at CBS offices in several cities. Conservative groups, on the other hand, praised the network for finally shutting down a show they thought had gone too far. For Tom and Dick Smothers, the cancellation was devastating. Other networks were afraid to work with them, and CBS mothers were afraid to work with them. Tom was seen as too difficult and too political. Dick, even though he was more moderate, was also blacklisted just because he was Tom's brother. Their television careers came to a sudden end. The brothers didn't give up without a fight. They sued CBS for breaking their contract and canceling the show for political reasons. The legal battle lasted for years. In 1973, a court ruled in favor of the Smothers brothers and awarded them $776,300.00 in damages. But by then, their careers had been destroyed. The cancellation also hurt their personal relationship. In later interviews, Dick admitted he didn't always agree with Tom's approach. He thought that if Tom had been willing to make some compromises, the show might have survived longer. But he also acknowledged that Tom's refusal to back down was what made the show so powerful. After the cancellation, Tom and Dick continued performing together in live shows across the country. Their dynamic remained the same, Tom the impulsive idealist and Dick the more careful brother. While they were no longer on television, their loyal fans still supported them. The cultural impact of the show became clearer over time. Among young writers, producers, and comedians, the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour became a landmark example of what television could be when it was brave enough to take risks. The show proved that comedy could do more than entertain. It could inform, challenge, and inspire. Lorne Michaels, who later created Saturday Night Live, said the Smothers Brothers influenced his work. Without their example, there might never have been an SNL. The idea that a comedy show could also comment on politics and society had been introduced to network television through their work. Over time, public opinion about the show began to change. What had once seemed reckless or inappropriate came to be seen as brave and ahead of its time. As society evolved, people began to reassess the show's place in history. The jokes and performances that once caused so much controversy started to feel remarkably relevant, sometimes even prophetic. In 2008, nearly 40 years after the cancellation, Tom Smothers was awarded an honorary Emmy. In his acceptance speech, he said simply, "Peace is harder than war." It was a quiet moment, but deeply meaningful. It marked recognition from the very industry that had once considered him too controversial to support. 2 years later, both Tom and Dick were inducted into the Television Academy Hall of Fame. The induction was more than a tribute to their entertainment work. It was an acknowledgement of their cultural significance and the risk they had taken in trying to move television into new territory. It was later revealed that both Tom and Dick Smothers had been placed on President Nixon's enemies list, a secret list of people the administration saw as political threats. While many on that list were journalists or politicians, the inclusion of two television comedians showed just how deeply their show had challenged those in power. By 2022, the show's complete archive was transferred to the University of California, Santa Barbara. This included scripts, unaired sketches, production notes, and internal CBS memos. The material was preserved for future researchers, students, and artists. Among the contents were several sketches CBS had tried to destroy, along with handwritten notes from Tom that revealed his detailed thought process. The digitization of the archive led to renewed interest in the show. For the first time, people could access the show's legacy without relying on rumors or scattered bootleg copies. Researchers began studying how the show functioned as political communication. Filmmakers and historians used the materials to explore the limits of free speech in corporate media. On social media platforms like YouTube, TikTok, and Reddit, clips from the show began resurfacing. Sketches that once sparked outrage were now viewed as early examples of satire that dared to challenge authority. The famous line, "Mom always liked you best," became a widely recognized cultural reference used in memes and nostalgic posts. When Tom Smothers passed away in late 2023, tributes poured in from around the world. Comedians, musicians, and television hosts reflected on his influence. Stephen Colbert, John Oliver, and Sarah Silverman all credited Tom and the show as trailblazers who had helped shape modern political comedy. At the New York Television Festival, a special memorial event was held where the previously banned David Steinberg's sermon was shown in full. For many young viewers, it was the first time they had seen the performance that CBS had once deemed too dangerous to air. Far from feeling outdated, the material struck a chord with its directness, humor, and moral clarity. Today, the influence of the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour can be felt everywhere. Modern television is more open to political commentary than it once was. Comedians are now expected to engage with serious topics as well as provide laughs. Shows like The Daily Show, Last Week Tonight, and Saturday Night Live owe a debt to what Tom and Dick Smothers started. The show is no longer on the air, but its legacy continues through its words, images, and impact. It serves as a reminder that comedy can be more than just entertainment. It can reflect the world, challenge authority, and spark change. Most importantly, it reminds us that the struggle for creative freedom is never truly over. Each generation of artists must face it in their own way, just as the Smothers Brothers did all those years ago. The controversial scene that took the Smothers Brothers Comedy Hour off the screen was more than just a comedy sketch. It was a moment when television dared to speak truth to power, and power decided it had heard enough. The show's cancellation marked the end of an era, but also the beginning of a new understanding of what comedy could accomplish when it refused to stay silent.